Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate the job, the work that you all do. It is so very important for our free republic to have integrity in our elections, and that has been something that has risen in the interest of the American people in the past several years. I'm the longest serving member of this committee, and this used to be an obscure committee when all that our jurisdiction was security of the Capitol and federal elections. And then in 2020, that became important to a lot of people for various reasons. And I thank you for being here. Secretary McCrane, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I understand that the Idaho state law requires voters to be documented U.S. citizens.
Correct.
Has this requirement unduly denied the vote to any lawful citizens?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I also understand that Idaho recently removed a number of non-citizens from the voter rolls. How was your office able to accurately identify and remove non-citizen voters in a timely manner?
I appreciate the question. As I mentioned, last summer we signed the Only Citizens Can Vote Act, and working through a process using our Idaho Transportation Department, Idaho State Police, and then most notably Department of Homeland Security. We ran the entire 1.1 million registered voters in Idaho through those systems to verify citizenship. I mean, easily determining citizenship for the overwhelming majority, but then really dialing it into a case-by-case basis to narrow it down to 34 individuals who were non-citizens on Idaho's voter rolls. But I think using that precision and scrutiny really helped. But as I identified in my remarks, there are still tools that are needed to help really bolster this for all of us.
Had you done that in the past, or was this the first time that you really started drilling down looking for non-citizens?
This was the first time that we'd actually had that, and I think this will be continued work, as you see from the President's executive order and other efforts.
Okay, I appreciate that. Some of our colleagues continue to maintain that non-citizen voting is a non-issue. Is that true, or do you have a different opinion on that?
I think every American wants to make sure that their vote can count and that their vote counts the same as everybody else, and that there is no one who's ineligible participating in our elections. Because as we know, anytime that happens, especially that razor-thin election like I mentioned earlier, it can cancel out somebody else's vote. So I do think this is an issue for determining accuracy.
Also, Idaho recently adopted the Only Citizens Can Vote Act, as you've mentioned. Can you share with us about how you and the governor were able to successfully collaborate with state law enforcement and verify citizen status, which you have a little bit? Is there anything specific in there that we can learn from how you work with law enforcement and other agencies?
I think specifically, it really does tie in both to voter ID, right? So identification that identifies citizenship. I think that's an ongoing conversation and something that you can continue to do work on. And then the other part really is investing in USCIS. So earlier today, I met with USCIS officials to talk about how can we bolster these efforts. I think they're eager to do the work. One of the things they reiterated to me was they are going to remove whatever barriers. So you heard from Secretary Allen some of the challenges other states had. To remove those barriers, but to make sure we have the accurate data we need to do this voter verification. Idaho competes with many of the states you guys represent for one of the fastest growing states in the nation. That means people are moving, people are coming in, and this is an ongoing effort to keep our voter rolls up to date and accurate.
So what can we do as Congress to assist you going forward with this? What would you like to see Congress do to make that more efficient and more accurate?
I think first and foremost is invest in this database. There needs to be a database built with this purpose in mind. And then also to review some of the policies. I will say there are some really unique incidents we identified, and I know this is a concern to make sure both non-citizens are not participating, but also citizens aren't interfered with. There's the Child Citizenship Act of 2000. There are what I would classify as undocumented citizens. These are people who've become citizen through their parents' naturalization, but it's actually not recorded because we haven't built the tools in place to do the verification we're doing. I think the efforts of this committee, though, you look at whether it's the SAVE Act, the President's executive order, are aimed towards that. So if you can continue to invest in those resources and these agencies, that will really make a difference.
Okay, thank you. And Secretary Landry, I have one question for you. I have a very good friend that used to serve in this chamber, is now the governor. Is there any relation?
We are not related. Governor Landry and I are from the same area
Right.
of the state, and Landry is a very common Cajun name. In Louisiana, it's the second most common Cajun name, so it's sort of like Smith in South Louisiana. But
Well, I assumed you weren't because I understood everything that you said while you were here. With that, I yield back.
I won't tell him you said that.